In today's video, I'm going to show you how to thread your needle so you'll never need to use a needle threader again. Hi everyone, Sarah here from Sarah Homfray Embroidery. Now we have looked at this subject before. We've got a long in-depth video about how to thread your needles, but we did that a while ago and I know people are still struggling with it. I see them all the time reaching for the needle threaders. So I thought it would be a good reminder for those of you who haven't seen it for a while, and for all of our new members who joining us and watching on YouTube, you may not have seen that video. So we're going to do it again. I'm going to do a shortened version, and then I'm going to do some tips as well on needles and using needles, so do stick around for that. Now I'm just going to look at the technique of threading needles. We've got more videos on this subject and I'll talk about those in a second and how you get to see those. So I'm just going to look at the technique now. So I've got some different threads I'm going to show you with, and the first one that I'm going to use is a cotton embroider thread. So this is just a single strand, and I've got a large needle here to show you the technique. So I see a lot of people going to the needle with the thread, and the thread bounces and bends like that and it doesn't go through the eye. So what we're going to do is, rather than take the thread to the needle, we're going to take the needle to the thread. So I'm going to put the thread in my dominant hand, so I'm right-handed, so thread in my right hand. If you're left-handed, put the thread in your left hand and the needle in your right. And what I'm going to do is pull it up between my thumb and my finger, and so I can see it. I'm going to turn my thumb and my finger around so I can see that thread, and I'm going to pull it up between the pad of my thumb and my finger, not my fingernail. I've got no control over that. So between the pads of my thumb and my finger, and I'm going to take the needle to the thread. So I'm pinching this really tight so it's almost disappeared between my fingers. So it's not going anywhere other than through the eye of the needle. I put the needle on the top, open my thumb and my finger, and the thread goes through the eye, like so. So we're going to do that quite a few more times, so don't worry if you didn't get that first go. Let's try it with some different types of thread. So this is a perlé thread, so this is a twisted thread, again just using the one strand of it. So what we can do now is, it's a little bit thicker than that cotton embroider, and you can just see the ends starting to fray a little bit. So what we're going to do is cut that at an angle. So I've got my embroidery scissors, cut it at an angle, nice sharp snip, so we get that little point on the thread and we're not fighting with the fluffy bit. So we're going to try that again. So same technique as before, finger and thumb towards me so I can see that thread, pull it up tight between the pad of my thumb and my finger so it's almost disappeared. Needle goes to the thread, over the top of the end of that thread, open my thumb and my finger up, and it goes through that needle first time. So the other thing that you can do with this is we can just coat it in some beeswax. So rather than licking it, people licking their thread all the time, it's not very nice if you chew your thread. So a better way is to use some beeswax. So I've got a little piece of it here. You can use a beeswax candle if you like. I'm just going to run it through that beeswax, and it's just going to stick those fibres together, just coats it. If you've got a thread conditioner, you can use that as well. It does the same thing, and that just makes that thread stiff. So if I lick that, it would go all floppy and socky and horrible. But I put it through the beeswax, so that's going to be nice and stiff. So we'll try that again now we've got that, and I'm going to use a slightly smaller needle this time, see if the technique works on this as well, and it should do. It should be fine for this thread. So exactly the same technique, pinch it tight, slightly smaller needle now, open my thumb and my finger, and it slides straight through. So let's try it with a stranded cotton or a stranded floss. This is a very popular embroidery thread, and it's made up of 6 different strands, and you can take them apart and use whatever number of strands you want. So let's just try it with all 6 initially. So I'm going to go back to my slightly larger needle. This is a chenille needle with a long thin eye in it, and I'm going to do the same again. So pinch, needle to the thread, open up your thumb and your finger, and it goes straight through. So what you need to do if you're practicing this technique is you need to get the technique sorted first. So try a larger needle, get the technique sorted, then you can work your way down to a smaller one and a needle that's suitable for the size of the thread. So start big and work your way down to small while you practice this technique. So I'm just going to try the 6 again in a smaller needle, just see if we can do that. So again, I'm going to just wax the ends because they're starting to separate as they're supposed to do because it's stranded. So I'm just going to run that through the beeswax, sticks it together a little bit. So pinch till it's disappeared, needle to the thread, and straight through. So once I've practiced with my larger needle, I'm taking it to the smaller needle and the technique still works. So I pulled one strand out of the stranded cotton there, and we're going to use a really fine needle now. So this is a number 10. They do go smaller than that, but you won't see it on the camera, I don't think, so we'll stick to that size. So I'm going to try and get that one in there, but exactly the same principle. It's quite fine, so a little bit harder to see, but I can still just see the end of it there. Nowhere to go other than through the eye like that. So it works for any size needle. It's the technique you have to practice, and then it should work for any thread and any size needle. So let's try it with a woolen thread, because this tends to be a bit fluffy and it can be a little bit harder to get through. So this is a Burma thread. It's 50% wool and 50% acrylic. I'm going to try it in this embroidery needle here. So again, pinch, and through it goes. Now the other thing you can do with a woolen thread is, if you find that end's a little bit fluffy, you can fold it in half. So let's try that technique. So I'm going to go behind my needle, needle on top, folding that thread over, sliding it off, and then I've got a really nice edge to go through the needle. I haven't got the fluffy end, I've got a nice edge to go through, and that goes through really nicely. So that's a good way to thread something that's a little bit fluffy on the end, fold it over the needle and use that to thread through the needle eye. So I've got another woolen thread to try here. So this is the Eco Vita Crewel thread range. So this one is a little bit thicker than the Burma. So there's the Burma and there's the Eco Vita. You can see it's probably about twice as thick. So I'm going to try that one. I'm going to change the size of the needle up one because it's a little bit bigger. And I'm going to fold this one round because you can see the ends have separated out there. I don't tend to wax the wool ones so much because it's very fibrous and it just gets caught in the wax, but the folding method works really well. So behind the needle, fold it over, pull it off the needle at the narrowest part. You can just see it there between my thumb and my finger. I've got rid of all that fluffy bit, open my thumb and my finger out, and that goes through the eye. So really good method for those slightly fluffy, awkward threads. So I'm going to do the whole technique again, and I'm going to show you with the beeswax, and then I'm going to show you how to put a knot on the end so your thread is not only threaded up in your needle, but it's ready to stitch with. So I'm going to use my perlé, slightly fluffy end, so I'm going to run it through some beeswax. You don't have to do that. I do emphasize again, try not to lick it. Not very nice. That makes the end nice and stiff. Pull it between the pads of my thumb and my finger, needle to the thread, open out my thumb and my finger, the thread goes through the eye, and then to put the knot in the end, this is a knot I like to do. It's really nice, sort of tidy small knot. I'm going to put the thread on my finger of my left hand now, so swap this over if you're left-handed, do this with your right hand. So thread goes on my finger, needle goes across it. I'm going to clamp the two together with my thumb and my finger. This top thread is going to go around the needle twice. Pull it back down to the bottom. Make sure you're still clamping this. Going to push that needle through, wiggle it through. Don't let go here. Just keep pulling all the way up until that's nice and tight, and then you've got a really nice, even, consistent knot to stitch with each time. So I've got some needle tips for you, and it's really, really important to get the right size needle for your thread. I often have people asking me, what size needle do I use for such and such a fabric? So it's more about the thread than it is about the fabric. The needle type will be suitable for the fabric, so you'll need a blunt needle, a tapestry needle if you're doing a counted technique, so cross stitch or needlepoint or black work. But it's the size of the needle that you need to match to the thread, not to the fabric. So we have a whole video on that subject. I'm not going to go into that now. Do go and check that one out. I'll show you where that is at the end of this video. So make sure you learn how to choose the right size needle for the thread that you're using. So don't forget, while you're practicing their technique, it's absolutely fine to start with a bigger needle and work your way down to a smaller needle, just to get that technique right and make sure you'll know that you're doing that right before you try and do it in a smaller needle. And if you still can't see to thread it, if you struggle with your sight, or if you have arthritis in your fingers, or any other reason why it's difficult, then use a bigger needle. It's absolutely fine. Nothing bad will happen, I promise you. Go to a bigger needle and don't struggle, so you can get on and enjoy your embroidery. Do also make sure that you change your needles regularly. I know people who've had needles for like their whole stitching life. They don't last forever. They do need changing. They do wear. They do get dirty. They do get sticky. They get blunt as well. They're not expensive things. Do change them over. Have a nice new needle to start your new project with. And I'm going to mention it again, try not to lick your threads. It's not the best way to thread them. You can use some beeswax if you want to, and if you don't have that, just make sure you cut your thread to a nice sharp point so that you can thread that easily through the needle. It should go absolutely fine without you having to lick it. So just a quick video for you this time, but one that's really important. Practice threading your needles and then you can get on and enjoy your embroidery. And if you want to learn more about needles, we've got the extended version of this video, plus lots of other videos on how to sort your needles, how to choose the right size needle and how to store them as well. You can check out our playlist with all of those videos in up here on your screen now. And if you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up and I'll see you next time.